In 7th century Arabia, the city of Mecca was under the firm grip of a powerful tribe known as the Quraysh. They were far more than a kinship group. They were the political, religious, and commercial backbone of the city. They held authority over the Kaaba and controlled the key trade corridors of Western Arabia. Among their most prominent figures were Abu Jahl, Abu Sufyan, and others who shaped the tribe's direction and decisions. In 610 CE, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, began calling people to monotheism, the belief in one God, Allah alone, and the rejection of idol worship. This message struck at the very heart of Quraysh power. Their religious influence and their economy both rested on idol veneration and the pilgrim traffic it generated. As Islam gained followers, the Quraysh turned to persecution. Muslims were subjected to torture, social boycotts, and forced expulsion from their homes. By 622 CE, the situation had become unbearable, and the Muslims undertook the Hijra, the migration from Mecca to Medina. This was no voluntary journey. It was an exodus driven by necessity and survival. When the Muslims departed, the Quraysh did not simply let them leave in peace. They confiscated their homes, seized their businesses, and took whatever wealth remained behind. Everything the migrants had built in Mecca was stripped away. At that time, long-distance commerce in Arabia was conducted through caravans, large convoys of camels transporting goods such as textiles, spices, and gold between Arabia and the Levant. The Syrian trade route was the financial artery of the Quraysh. It connected Mecca to Damascus and Jerusalem, generating the revenues that funded their armies, sustained their influence, and kept them at the top of the regional power structure. Even after the Hijra, the conflict between the two sides did not fade. The Quraysh remained wealthy and militarily strong, their caravans continuing to move freely along established routes, while the Muslim community in Medina had been left with almost nothing. In the second year after the Hijra, during the month of Ramadan, word arrived in Medina that a major Quraysh caravan was making its way back from Syria, led by Abu Sufyan, one of the senior Quraysh commanders and the chief organizer of their trade operations. The caravan was laden with goods of considerable value, a significant portion of which was believed to have come from property seized from Muslims who had fled Mecca. It was guarded by a force of roughly 40 men. The Prophet, peace be upon him, mobilized a force of approximately 313 men to intercept it. Their motivation was twofold. The caravan represented stolen wealth, and it represented the ongoing economic strength of those who had driven them out. The Muslim force was lightly armed. They had only 2 horses, around 70 camels shared among the entire group, minimal armor, and mostly basic infantry weapons. Abu Sufyan, sensing the threat, rerouted the caravan along the Red Sea coast and dispatched a messenger to Mecca, urgently requesting military reinforcement. The Quraysh leadership responded swiftly, raising an army of approximately 1,000 warriors, well-equipped with horses, armor, and full provisions. Even after news arrived that Abu Sufyan had successfully diverted the caravan to safety, Abu Jahl refused to turn back. He was Islam's most fierce adversary, deeply implicated in the persecution of Muslims in Mecca, and he was determined not to retreat. Driven by the desire to crush the Muslims and uphold Quraysh prestige, he pushed the army onward toward the valley of Badr. When the Muslims learned that the caravan had escaped and that a large enemy force was now advancing toward them, the Prophet, peace be upon him, called a consultative council, a shura. He did not order anyone to fight, he asked for their honest views. Among those present were Abu Bakr, Omar, Ali, and Hamza. A key concern was how the Ansar, the Muslims of Medina, who had welcomed and sheltered the Meccan refugees, would respond, since their pledge of protection had originally been made within Medina's boundaries. Their leader, Sa'ad ibn Mu'adh, stood and gave an unequivocal answer. He pledged that the Ansar would stand beside the Prophet ﷺ wherever he led, without hesitation. Al-Miqdad ibn al-Aswad similarly declared his unwavering commitment. With this unity affirmed, the army moved toward Badr. Arriving at the valley ahead of the Quraysh, the Muslims secured the water wells, denying access to the approaching enemy force. That night, rain came down. It firmed the ground beneath the Muslims' feet while turning the Quraysh camp into mud. The Prophet ﷺ spent the night in prayer, asking Allah for victory and support. At dawn, the engagement began with individual duels, as was the custom of Arabian warfare. A Quraysh fighter who attempted to access the water was killed by Hamza ibn Abd al-Muttalib, the Prophet ﷺ's uncle and one of Islam's most formidable warriors. Then 3 Quraysh nobles stepped forward: Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, his brother Shayba, and his son al-Walid. They were met by Hamza, Ali ibn Abi Talib, and Ubaidah ibn al-Harith. Ali struck down al-Walid. Hamza killed Shayba. Ubaidah sustained a fatal wound in the exchange and died from it shortly after. The two armies then engaged in full battle. Though heavily outnumbered, the Muslims held their ground and their formation. The Quran records that Allah sent unseen support to the believers at Badr, a divine reinforcement that is understood not as angels fighting in visible, physical form, but as an inner strengthening of Muslim resolve, a weakening of enemy confidence, and a divinely directed outcome. This is referenced in Surah Al-Anfal as God's assistance during the battle. Abu Jahl was wounded by 2 young fighters and subsequently killed by Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, a man who had himself once been publicly humiliated by the Quraysh in Mecca. With Abu Jahl's fall, the Quraysh army lost its nerve. Some fled, others were taken captive. The losses were staggering on the Quraysh side, approximately 70 killed and 70 more captured. Among those who died were Abu Jahl, Utbah ibn Rabi'ah, Shayba ibn Rabi'ah, and Umayyah ibn Khalaf. The bodies of several prominent leaders were lowered into a well. The Muslim losses amounted to 14 men. The Prophet, peace be upon him, remained at Badr for several days afterward. He declared that Allah's promise had been fulfilled. Badr was more than a military engagement. It transformed a community of exiles and refugees into a recognized political force in the Arabian Peninsula. It became known as Yawm al-Furqan, the Day of Distinction, the day on which truth and falsehood were set apart for all to see.